Hey everyone, thanks to everyone who's taken the time today to join us in this conversation. We have Alex Manson from SV Ventures, Jupe from Plug&Play. We'll introduce them in a bit, and myself, Fridtjof Berge from Antler. We're here today to have a discussion around how innovation labs and accelerators are effective in driving financial innovation. And I'm very much looking forward to getting different views from both the moderators and panelists, and also happy to jump in with the views from what we're doing at Antler as well. Quick background to myself. So I'm one of the co-founders and partners and the COO of Antler. Antler is a global venture capital firm working from a very early stage with entrepreneurs across both fintech and other industries. And we work on being very close to entrepreneurs and their ideas for the first couple of months in their development of their journey, and also become an investor from a very early stage in the ideas that we believe have high potential to bring positive impact. We started in Singapore in 2017, and a key driver behind starting in this region out of this city has been all the positive drive and support for developing new entrepreneurs and developing successful companies here. And I think that the Singapore Fintech Festival is a big part of making that happen, driving more people to see all the exciting opportunities in this region. Since then, we've grown to become a global platform and global company, investing in and helping build companies across the US, across Europe, Africa, Sydney as well in Australia, and many more regions. I wanted to introduce also, of course, the very distinguished panelists. I'll start with Alex from SV Ventures. He's essentially heading up a very exciting business unit in Standard Chartered, which is really looking at investing in fintech companies, testing new ideas with the group, whether they are wholly or partially owned by the group, and comes from a very exciting background in that company. I think, Alex, since you have so much more to add there, I really wanted to get you to add a bit of your background and also maybe touch upon what the objectives of SV Ventures is in a bit more detail in your introduction.
Sure. Thank you. Hi everyone. Good to be here virtually. And yes, you said it. So SV Ventures is a business unit of Standard Chartered. We set it up in a little over 2.5 years ago. So we're relatively nascent as well. And essentially we amalgamate different things. We deploy capital. We invest in companies we work with, either within the bank or in the ventures. We build our own companies. We build our own startups, ranging from digital banks to platforms for e-commerce, to banking as a service business, to payments business, and stay tuned for a few more announcements as in the coming days. But at the core of it, arguably, we also run an accelerator, which we call the Accelerator. And that is where we engage with a lot of fintechs, engage in the form of POCs, pilots, different types of engagement. This is where we run the intrapreneur program, where thousands of people within the bank have registered and step forward with ideas, and we take them all the way to completion, to becoming either products or the services of the bank, or in some cases actually independent ventures. And also run the Fintech Bridge, which is a platform where use cases from the bank and some of our clients meet with startups and tech companies. So there's the three activities: accelerator, investments, and venture building, which we do at SV Ventures. I'll get back to why and how when we get to the core of the subject, which is it effective to have a lab, and do labs actually transform companies? I have a bit of a controversial view on this, but why don't we get to this when we've given a chance to Jupe to introduce himself as well, and we'll get to it.
Yeah, no, very much looking forward to unpacking that as well, and thanks for in a very good good way highlighting the key pillars of the exciting work you're doing. Yeah, I think with that, very happy to also introduce Jupe Tan. Has been with Plug&Play since 2008. Has done a ton of investments and supported a lot of companies in the APAC region over the last couple of years. And very much happy to wish you a big welcome, Jupe. And if you can do maybe the same, introduce what you're doing, and we'll jump into some of our key themes afterwards.
Great, thank you, Fridtjof, and good to be here with you and Alex and the audience as well. I guess this year is a strange one for everyone involved. We can see from our various interesting backgrounds how we are all dealing with the pandemic. So as by way of introduction, Plug&Play is the world's largest open innovation platform, or at least we believe we are. We started out in the late 90s as angel investors investing into startups out of Silicon Valley. I joined in 2008 after we started what I like to say the co-working business before co-working was cool or sexy. But our business has evolved quite a fair bit over time. We've really come to our current business model within the last 5 years or so. So today we are about 500 people across 12 plus countries, 30 plus cities around the world. There are 3 core activities that we pursue, and they are all around open innovation, startups, and the high-tech ecosystem. Number 1, we run accelerator programs around the world. So at any given time, we are running about 50 plus programs. Some of these are our own programs where they are tied to a particular vertical or theme, for example, financial services. And with that, we would have multiple corporations and partners aggregating their problem statements and sourcing for startups as a combined program. Sometimes our programs are dedicated ones. So for example, we ran the Facebook Accelerator program for Facebook in the region out of our APIX HQ Singapore office this year. Second core activity is corporate innovation. So we source for deal flow for our corporate partners, and we bring startups to them. So around the world at any one time, we work with about 400 plus MNCs, corporations, and all that. They are banks, they are insurance companies, they are traditional companies, they are conglomerates, mining companies, retail companies, quite a wide range. And we like to say that we are not the McKinseys of the world that will give you your entire strategy. We say go to the McKinseys and the BCGs, figure out what your innovation or digital strategy is, and then we'll come in for the startup piece where we help you identify solutions that can work with or plug some of the gaps in your business, for example. And we'll get more into this later. Last but not least, we are very active early stage investors. So over the last 20 years, we have invested in about 1,200 plus companies. We've had about, I would say about 10 plus unicorns. Last few years, our activity has accelerated. So on average, we did almost 200 investments per year in the last 2 to 3 years. This year, obviously, a little bit less because of the lesser interaction. We had, I think, something like 14 exits last year, so that was a good year for us. We hope to share more as the session progresses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and very, very impressive to hear what Plug&Play has been doing over the last years. I think that we can jump into some of the key themes around this topic, and I also know that there might come in some questions from the audience as we go along. So for those listening, please share your questions, and we'll try to get to them as part of this conversation. I think one interesting topic, Alex was touching upon it a little bit in the intro, so maybe I'll start by asking you that question, and Jupe and myself, we can jump in. I think it evolves around, there is a lot of financial innovation happening without innovation labs, accelerators, early stage investors, whether it's just by companies themselves or by large corporates in more traditional formats. So what are, maybe from your own learnings or from good or bad learnings that you've observed in other places, what's the key role or sort of value add that these setups can provide to drive financial innovation and essentially build good value-adding companies? So Alex,
let me just start. Yeah, what are the key roles? And we can get back to whether it works or not. And I was also going to caveat the fact that there's different types of innovation. Innovation is a very, very broad term for day-to-day business as usual innovation, which is small, not so visible, but actually non-negotiable, because if you don't do it, you fall behind. And so while the return on these things is not very high because everyone does it, so it's not differentiated, it's very important you do it. And NABs have a role to play in that respect, versus the more disruptive innovations, be it massive product innovation or business model innovation, which is a very important one, which are less frequent, bigger, riskier, but obviously can be quite impactful. And labs in that sense play a different role, and the setup needs to be a little different. So I was on the former. I think generally speaking, actually, lab can provide a safe-ish environment, and I say safe-ish because it's still part of the institution or the corporation. People still feel exposed to reputational risk. The regulations apply and all that, notwithstanding sandboxes and likes which we can create. So it's a safe-ish environment to experiment with things in a contained way. And that's what labs are used for, generally speaking. Labs are also a way to do things differently, right? Apply methods and a framework which the corporate wouldn't normally apply, such as starting very small, what we call an MVP, and that applies to product thinking, to design thinking, as much as you would apply to setting up a new startup. And testing and iterating, and we joke in the space that the successful ones aren't the ones that had the better ideas; they're the ones that literally iterated the most. And that applies to product design in life, generally speaking. So a lab can be a way to have those ways of working ingrained when the corporation might otherwise do things a little differently. I think labs are play the role of bringing very diverse backgrounds together in an agile space. Not to overuse the word, but this is where we amalgamate design thinkers, technologists, and in our case bankers, and a bunch of other backgrounds that are actually very important. That diversity of thinking and that diversity of background is very important in the context of labs. And I would argue that all these things apply to other kind of innovation. Right? All those things apply to incremental innovation, so to call it, and also business model innovation. But then the setup needs to differ. So in as much as I think that digitizing the bank in our case, being more efficient, doing things better, cheaper, faster, etc., is as I said, it's non-negotiable. But this is where the lab will help facilitate, but ultimately the corporate needs to own it. And either the real owner, the real sponsor behind it, and we'll provide all the help we can to achieve the objectives. But the principle is the firm. Whereas when it comes to business model innovation, some of that has to be done outside the corporate, and the ability to take things outside, potentially bring them back inside, and so forth, is also some of the things that a lab can do. And so, experimenting with different ways of doing business is one of the things that is a lot harder for an established business unit to do, and so you do in a lab. And perhaps the last point I'd make is this mix, or this merger, or the blurring of the line between what's inside the corporation and what's outside the corporation is one of the aspects where a lab can do great things. So normally in business, you're either part of the corporation or you're outside, right? You're a supplier, you're clients, you have contracts, but there's a very well-defined boundary. Whereas when we interact with startups, we call them partners, and such partners are bring in capabilities which we want to implement, and that mixing of what's outside and what's inside the corporation is a difficult but very powerful thing to do, because most good ideas actually come from outside, statistically speaking, and so the ability to execute on that, it typically takes an accelerator or a lab to actually achieve it. I'll stop here for a second.
Yeah, no, thank you, and again, many great topics to go deeper on, but Jupe, would love to hear your review as well. Focusing on a lot of the same things, but in a slightly different way, of course, with Plug&Play.
Sure, and I will follow on from what Alex says. I think completely agree with what you're saying. I think there's the iterative innovation that every corporation, every business needs to do, and that's improving your current technologies, business lines, etc. But there's also potential disruptive technologies that can come in. There's also new business lines that can be explored with external innovation. So I think for us, we see a role for everyone to play, whether it's internal labs, external accelerators, venture builders like Antler, right? We see different things. Sometimes it's as simple as education, if you will, because many of these corporations have been around for decades or even hundreds of years in some cases. And a lot of folks internally sometimes have been there for a long time and doing something one way. We approach, when we get to talk to a potential corporate partner, we always like to go to the C-suite so that we can see if there's really an executive mandate to drive innovation. And then we love it when there are specialized innovation arms that are set up to some extent. Because if you go directly to the one particular business unit, or God forbid you go to the IT department, the IT department will always say, we can build this in 3 months, no problem. And then 6 months later, it's not built, right? And there's nothing wrong, because the example that we give is that you may have a very hardworking team, but they have a 9-to-5 job. They have their KPIs and their targets, and innovation is almost always something extra. So I think the ability to kind of go out to look at fresh ideas is good. I will use maybe 2 examples in the earlier years that help us to define this accelerator business model that we have. This was back in the day, maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago, when PayPal X and Volkswagen ERL both came to us. To use Volkswagen as an example, they have had an electronics research lab in Silicon Valley for the longest time, and they came to us and they said, look, we have 1,000 PhDs and they are working on 10,000 ideas, but we know there's still stuff out there that's happening, and we want to know. So perhaps it could be if we come back to financial services, it could be the next generation of EKYC or AML, etc. You are building something internally on your own, but there are 100, 1,000 startups that are building such solutions as well. And that's all they think of every day. They only think of KYC, right? So I think there's a role to play for the different players. What we like at Plug&Play is that as we work with multiple corporate partners in different geographies around the world, we can see what works, right? And we can see a solution that works here that can be perhaps deployed in another place. So we like to say that, understand what you as a corporation are looking for as a problem statement, if you will. We help you to refine it, and then you do your own thing, and then we'll help you to source for additional startups or solutions that can fit into that puzzle. So we've had, I think, pretty good success, whether it's POCs or deployments, or in some cases, corporate venture arms will invest or co-invest as well, which is all good. Stop there.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
I can build on I was going to just echo you alluded to some of the syndromes which every corporate sort of will experience at some point. So NIH stands for not invented here. DIY stands for do it yourself. And you've just touched on policies, procedures, onboarding, KYC, whatever, whatever it is, and there's an element, those things are here for a reason. So there's absolutely no point being dismissive about that. First, it doesn't work, and second, again, they're here for a reason. But there's also an element of navigating intelligently, and clearly, lab can help in that respect. Sort of navigate the organization in an efficient way. Also, time box things sometimes. So if something doesn't work, it's better no because than yes maybe. Yes maybe preserves optionality for the big corporation, but it drains everybody's time and resources, and a startup cannot afford to do that. So time boxing and saying no with feedback is at times a lot more productive than extending the process just for the sake of it. And then last thing you touched on is tone from the top. There's absolutely no point talking about transformation or corporate innovation if the tone from the top isn't there. And I mean at the CEO level. Otherwise, the organization ends up paying lip service to it, which I've seen a lot in every industry. And I just think life's a little too short to pay lip service to things. So rather not do that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Alex. And I think that adding a bit to what's already been said, a lot of the companies we have helped build and also invested in, a lot of them are in the fintech sector, and a big problem in the financial sector, I think, is for many reasons, there's a lot of compliance and regulatory issues that needs to be met in order to introduce innovation, right? Which is, we've been talking in quite generic terms so far, but I think in particular in the fintech sector, having these sort of safe havens with the labs, with accelerators, and with a little bit lower threshold to try and also to connect and convince a larger company to look into your solution, I think is very important. We had recently a kind of fintech circle event where we bring in all these portfolio companies from across regions and talk about the challenges and the problems they're facing. And one of them is often exactly this, right? That we have a good solution, but for various reasons, it can be culture, not set up for change, as you guys discussed, or it can be just regulatory reasons why they simply cannot test in the way that would make sense. But thirdly, it's just about getting the foot in the door and starting to work together and proving the value. And I think that setups, as you've been both discussing, makes this easier, and I think it's quite crucial to convince larger financial institutions of the innovation. Another point you brought up, Alex, is of course these blurry lines, or it's not always easy to figure out what's or define the best way to run things. Of course, every now and then we all read about situations where maybe a startup wasn't too happy with the corporate, and maybe the lines were not clear enough. But I think that typically corporates are also realizing, at least from my experiences, that if you don't treat startups nice, there's also a lot of opportunities for the startups to go elsewhere, right? And just similar to not all innovation happening in the big corporates going forward, the startups also have a lot of opportunity to go different routes versus being very, very dependent on just a few corporates. But it is right. Great to get both of yours perspectives here as well. Like, how do we make sure, if we put on the big corporate angle, that you're finding the right balance between supporting, but also making sure that in the end you meet your own KPIs in terms of developing good companies and ideally having a stake in that development?
So, start you mentioned nice, and clearly there's an element about it, and we all like to think that we're nice people. And I think corporates have come a long way from we don't need to deal with startups because everything's fine, and so why bother, to we don't want to because it's foreign, it's different, it's literally outside. and the disruptors, so we don't like them, to actually we are beginning to embrace them. And so I think it's a big difference between the corporate space today versus what it was only a few years ago in terms of the level of acceptance of the fact that dealing with tech startups is a good thing. Having said this, it doesn't always have to be about understanding or being nice. It's also a question of setup, and that is where the lab kind of comes in, right? A corporation is designed to protect the corporation. A corporation negotiates accordingly. Corporation, by the way, doesn't exist. It's a bunch of people and an amalgamation of contracts, right? And some argue just a story around it. But when you're a startup coming in from outside, you'll meet with the procurement department, and the procurement department is designed, trained, and incentivized to get the best possible deal out of the situation and protect the corporation. And they will differentiate relatively little between Microsoft at one end and a startup from with a few people at the other end. And so an RFP is an RFP. When it comes to IP, same thing. So corporations, lawyers are trained to think of IP in certain terms. Not necessarily realizing that the IP may be all the startup brings to the table. So there has to be an element of balance where what you bring to the table is yours, what I have today is mine, and what we build together is ours. Which sounds like a enunciation of principles for that, but it's then the devil is in the details. So I think there's an element of setup where engaging directly with a corporation can be very frustrating, and I'm sure some of your startups will have experienced it, and that's assuming everyone's well intentioned. Right. That's assuming no one's abusing the situation. That's assuming no one's playing the optionality because it doesn't cost me as a big guy. But and I don't really care if I drain the resources of someone else. That's assuming that people genuinely embrace the need for outside input and ideas and innovation ideas, but also the way of doing things and the way of implementing them. So there's clearly an element of not just navigating all those things, but also creating the environment where we address the type of issues that I've just mentioned. I would argue the most important trait you're expecting from anyone you're interacting with in a corporate is empathy, and empathy can be misconstrued for being nice. I can think of very empathetic people who aren't nice, but empathy is about understanding what the other person is about and putting yourself in their shoes. So in other words, if a company is so early stage that it barely has enough cash in the bank account to make it through a procurement process, I need to understand this, because the right answer may well be come back and see us when you're a little more mature and can actually bear with our procurement process. And likewise, empathy is about understanding that doing a POC that goes nowhere with no commitment, should the POC be successful, to actually go and implement in production and have a budget behind it, is again a complete waste of time and draining of resources of a startup that can ill afford it. So that notion of empathy is about intelligently understanding what the startup is about, and adapting and adjusting a little bit what the corporation does in order to find the right match.
And maybe I'll build on that a little bit. And I think what we like to say after seeing thousands of interactions around the world is that your mileage will vary, right? And it takes both sides. It takes two hands to clap. So on the corporate side, we are saying, look, don't expect a startup to be able to go through a 100-page contract, etc. Can you find a way? Do you have an avenue whereby it's a slightly more streamlined process, perhaps in the form of a lab type of engagement with a POC, where it's a little bit simpler, where it's not looking at your actual data, you're not going to affect your current business, etc. And on the other hand, with the startups, there should be realistic requests and expectations, right? Knowing that, yes, you have X amount of resources, you have X amount of runway, there are so many partners that you are chasing and going after. Be realistic, be optimistic, but also be very realistic to what you might be able to deliver or not. So we try to help both sides navigate that, if you will, because we've seen a lot of mismatches and yeah, exactly like with Alex saying, like doing a POC that doesn't get anywhere, or scoping out a 3-month POC that takes 7 months and then doesn't go anywhere. We have literally seen all kinds of engagements, and some that have gone very well, right? When it's properly scoped out, expectations are managed on both sides, realistic timeline is put in, and the results do show.
Thank you. I think typical question which is hard to get out of the way in 2020 is, of course, the pandemic and the impact on innovation. And I think that rather than maybe looking too much at what has happened, although it's great to include in your replies, but I would also be curious to hear from both of you, coming with all this experience in this space, how you think about innovation in the financial sector going forward, whether it changes how big institutions should think about it, and also the startups, and what we can maybe expect in next year, to the extent you're comfortable making some type of prediction.
So there's many different levels, and there's a joke, and I feel a little bad about joking about pandemic because it's a tragic event for many people, obviously, and every casualty is too many. But one silver lining is the best chief innovation officer we've ever had is called COVID-19. Right? It's created a sense of urgency and an ability to get certain things done, which wouldn't have happened. I'll give you a quick example, which is we wanted to implement e-signatures when I was in running the transaction bank. It didn't make my priority list really. It wasn't the main thing, so it was relegated to second priority in terms of the budgeting process. When we set up SC Ventures, we wanted to put it out to get out of the drawer. Wanted to do it. I ran around with a colleague of mine around the organization looking for a few dollars for it, but obviously it didn't get much there. We were able to implement it in less than 6 months, and Standard Chartered is now on its signature, as many other corporates are. So a few things are getting done in a way that they weren't before. Having said this, generally speaking, my comment on innovation would be that it's been pretty good in terms of executing on things we already agreed with people we already know. Like this conference, right? We sort of know each other. We don't, but we can sort of say the ability to attend meetings, the ability to execute on a process digitally. Actually, that it took a bit of adjustment for everyone, but that was just fine. It is quite a lot harder to agree new things with people we don't know, right? Which is what is required of some of the breakthrough innovations. And so in that sense, the pandemic has clearly created a setback for any of the innovation processes. So different the different situations there. Generally speaking, I'd just reflect on life, not so much after COVID. I don't think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see a tunnel per se. I think this thing is here with us for some period of time, one way or another, even in a different form. And so the life going forward is going to be a little different, and that has massive implications in terms of urgency to innovate, but also the type of things we innovate with. I would just name one, which is given the amount of suffering out there, and specifically in our footprints, given the number of businesses that have been struggling, I think the societal impact of what we do is coming to the front. Like Imam was always there. It's very clear to a lot more people how important it will be to have impact in the societies and markets where we operate, and have a positive impact, because alleviating the suffering that results from the pandemic is going to be a priority for pretty much all societies. We innovators, if we want to call ourselves this way, have a role to play, or otherwise, don't belong.
Thank you, Alex. Do you want to add something, Jupe, or should I jump in?
You know, what Alex said about COVID, and I also completely agree. It's a global tragedy. Hopefully, we will, get out of it sooner rather than later and improve our lives. But what Alex said actually reminded me of what the Singapore DPM Heng Swee Keat said in his budget in May, and it's still true. He quoted a McKinsey study that said that 5 years of consumer and business digital adoption happened in 8 weeks, right? And it was something that no CEO or CTO or head of innovation could do. But COVID accelerated digitalization and digitization. And coming to financial services, and maybe not just financial services, I think a lot of things will be here to stay. Contactless payments, buy now, pay later types of setup. Something interesting that I personally just experienced, and not specifically financial services, but I think a lot of things that innovations that have already taken place. Let's say e-signatures, e-KYC, biometric readers, that where the technologies already exist will actually start to get deployed, right? And these the personal example I'll give is that I recently flew to the US using my global entry and all that. I know it's crazy going to the US at this time, but I kind of had to make that one trip and then come back to Singapore. And I was really surprised where they have using the same machines, they have removed all physical requirements. So no scanning of the passport, not even scanning within the screen. It was a biometric facial recognition, everything came out. And I was like, so this technology had always been there. It's the same machine. And I asked the immigration folks, they're like, yeah, it's been there for the last few years. We just never turned it on. So I think, that's one interesting thing that corporations around the world, businesses around the world are going to adopt, are going to accelerate their adoption of digital solutions in general. And I think that's, at the end of the day, probably better for everyone.
Thank you. And I think you both pointed to the speed of innovation and how much faster it's been progressing in this very tough situation for many. And a question I would like to come back to shortly is around now perhaps more than ever, it's super important with the financial innovation happening across markets where people are really impacted, which is almost any market in the world. And we would love to hear some of the spaces that you're perhaps the most hopeful that there will be financial innovation in. But I think before we go to that, I know there was one question from the audience that Alex, you kindly in the chat volunteered to address. So maybe we'll just jump into that first, and then we can go into the next question.
And the question from my friend Dan Liebau is that many innovation teams are part of the IT technology functions. So not sure if the comments about technology departments make so much sense. My view on this would be it sort of doesn't matter where the lab or the innovation function is housed. It has to be somewhere. But one thing it is not about is technology. And you can very well be part of the technology function, but this is not about technology. In fact, when we design our sort of mission statement to call it in a very conventional way, rewiring the DNA in banking, the point we were making is all banking. Rewiring has a technological element to it, but it's not about the technology, right? It's about the DNA. DNA being people. Meaning if we were going to evolve, transform banking, it would be about business models and ways of working. And this is all about humans and people as opposed to the technology. Now, don't get me wrong, technology is very, very important. It's omnipresent. It's the enabler for a lot of these things. But it's kind of not the point. And people often get distracted by just focusing on the technology as in that really cool toy or that really cool gadget that sometimes can be a solution looking for a problem. Whereas what we really want to do is have impact on clients we serve, on markets where we evolve, and start with a client view, serving clients the way they want to be served, and then applying technology to that, which is a really different mindset. I hope that answers Dan's question.
Thank you. And otherwise, Daniel, you should reach out to us afterwards as well, and we'll chat more. Yes, I think we have roughly 5 minutes left, and the question I wanted to address is around what are the areas that we believe will be particularly important to see financial innovation, or particularly ready for financial innovation now in the coming years. And I think that kind of as a backdrop, what has surprised me a little bit maybe with the discussion globally in these very challenging months has been that there's surprisingly little talk about just this absolutely devastating situation that a lot of people in low-skilled jobs in a lot of developing countries are in. Sometimes simply to the fact that kind of the stock market is doing well, which has very little correlation with people's day-to-day life. And I really think that, or hope that innovation around easier access to credit and easier ways to have a good business case for bringing people back in the physical jobs around in many of these markets. I hope that there will be a lot of focus there. I wouldn't say I'm too positive, because it's not always the most important areas for innovators, but it's just incredible how hard this part of the population has been hit, and I do believe that financial innovation can play a key role in this, and I hope that really we as players in this ecosystem can help drive that. So that's a few of my thoughts, but would love to hear from both Alex and Jupe in the few minutes we have left.
I echo that. The most important thing, arguably, financial innovation can contribute to is financial inclusion, and repairing some of the damage done by the pandemic, and sort of taking societies forward. Financial inclusion means different things to different people, from anywhere between microfinance and mid-cap financing. But I reflect on Solve, which is a platform we launched in India to provide e-commerce services to SMEs, and we talk about SMEs as the forgotten middle, somewhere between that large consumer market and the very large corporates. They need help. They need business services. They need to be able to operate their businesses more efficiently. Essentially, focus on growing their business at times where it's really just difficult to survive. So enabling SMEs is one of the most important forms of financial inclusion I can think of. Banking people in the way they need to be served is perhaps another one in the retail space. It's not so, there's obviously an element of including people in the financial system that weren't included before, but simply, enabling them, an element of financial education, an element of access to basic financial services, which should improve the well-being of literally lots and lots of people. So I'd say financial inclusion broadly is a bit of a thread that goes through a lot of our ventures as we think of the themes we focus on.
Thank you. Jupe, any final thoughts from your end?
Sure, and I'll just share. I think financial innovation is different for different people in different markets, right? So two of the markets that we work in the region are Singapore and Indonesia. So in Singapore, you read with interest, 4 new challenger banks e-banking licenses issue, but the banking penetration is already so high, right? So maybe there's a case for wealth management or robo-advisories and all that, but how many more bank accounts need to be opened here? Whereas if you look at a country like Indonesia, where we have many investments from micro lending, peer-to-peer lending to funding micro businesses, I think just the ability to get, like Alex said, basic banking services, whether it's through a financial institution, a non-bank financial institution, or like a new challenger bank, right? For people to be able to access their paycheck, right? Access the money that's theirs and not have to resort to let's say payday loans and things like that. I think just that improvement in access and improvement in efficiency many times in terms of whether it's opening accounts, reducing the paperwork, reducing fraud. I think that's the biggest improvement that we can see in access to financial services.
Thank you, Jupe. And I think we can go on for hours, but I'm very glad we got to have you both with me here on this discussion. I think we'll have to leave it here, being conscious of time. But thanks again for learning about the work you do in SC Ventures and Plug&Play, and of course from your previous backgrounds. And thanks to everyone for listening in, and of course to Singapore Fintech Festival for allowing us to participate in this panel. So thank you all very much.